Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/The Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, I've got the privilege of talking to Johnny today. Johnny's an individual, got a long history of being involved with logging out there in the Pacific Northwest and also in Colorado, and got some really interesting things to share on the show today. So welcome to the show, Johnny.
Oh, thank you, Jeremiah.
Absolutely, and happy birthday as well, sir.
Yes, I appreciate that.
You got it, man. Let's get right into it, because you already said there's a lot for you to share, it sounds like. So, Johnny, I'm going to go ahead and give things right over to you. Feel free to take us back to where we need to be when this all started for you.
Yeah, so, my name is John, and go by Johnny, and I've lived in the Pacific Northwest, born and raised. And go straight to my first encounter, about 5.5, almost 6 years now. I lived in a little town called Clear Lake, Washington, and was smoking cigarettes at the time. Of course, that's not a good habit to ever have, but I would wake up to have to go to the restroom in the middle of the night and would go down and go out on my front porch, because most of the time it's raining, whether it's spring or fall, but it was early spring. And I just stepped out on the porch, and it was dark, and lit a cigarette, and it sounded like 1,000 coyotes and a tiger roar all at the same time, to the point that it felt like, did it vibrate me, but it vibrated the front of my house. And I just kind of went and just threw my cigarette out in the yard and in the house and locked the door. And I was kind of just thought to myself, wow, there ain't much I could do right now if that thing wanted to come get me, because as big as it sounded, I'm not messing with it. So, and it was a clear vocal, because then I heard heavy footsteps. So it was, I don't know if I startled it, is what I was thinking, probably, because I noticed that in that area, when they come back in the spring, wherever they come from, they like to push trees out into the roads. You'll go like a mile up certain roads, and there'll be a tree that the top just barely sticks out in the road a couple, 2 or 3 feet, and then a mile or two later, there'll be another one. But there'd be no windstorms or anything during that time. And then almost thinking that they're marking their way, that they're coming back in, kind of letting others know that they're, traveling up power lines or going back to wherever their feeding grounds, probably on the early spring and through the summer. So, and that was kind of my first, close enough that it really scared my pants off. And then we'll go to my second one. And so by now I've bought a place in a small town called Marblemount, Washington. And it was a heavily timbered 1.5 acres. And being from a logging family, I was really excited about it, because I got it for a good price and I could log it. And my young son was staying with me 50% of the time. And so I was driving back and forth from Marblemount to Clear Lake to take him to school or drop him off or pick him up on a Friday night. I'd have him Friday till like Tuesday. And I remember I dropped him off that day to go see his mom, and he would spend, I think it was Tuesday through Friday or whatever it was when I picked him up. And I was coming back on a well-traveled road out of Cedar Woolley, and it was like I'm just driving along in my little diesel Volkswagen Beetle, and all of a sudden, a very young adolescent Sasquatch just came, kind of like it was like Michael Jordan. It must have jumped, 15 or 20 yards before the road, because it came down in the middle of the road and did a little stutter step and then jumped again. And there was probably 7 of the highland cows that were up against the road. It was fenced along the road, and it cleared the highland the cattle there. And then there was very tall grass that they hadn't cut for hay yet. It's 3.5, 4 feet tall. And by the time I got up to him, and I probably maybe 1/8 a mile was all. And by the time I got up there, it was gone. But I got a real good description of him. He was jet black, a kind of a conical head, very lengthy arms, skinny though. He didn't look unhealthy, but he looked like he was young and skinny, like how everybody is when they're in their youth. But and then when he was stretched out, his arms stretched out. Like when he hit, it was like one arm went forward and the other one went back. And I noticed a very almost a orangutan orange under his armpit. Like where he sweated at would be the color of him. But he was jet black and shiny as could be. And as I pulled up in my Volkswagen, I'm kind of looking for him. And then all of a sudden, just a fear come over me. And I'm like, what the heck am I doing, man? This thing just come out of the sky is what it looked like. And, it had to jump. I would hate to say how many feet it probably jumped to arc like that. I kind of explain it like if you ever watch Michael Jordan do a three-pointer when he hits the top of the key, and it seems like he's just floating up and up and up. And then as he comes down that arc, that's exactly what I got to see, is him hit double step and go. So that was my second encounter. About the same years I had the screamer on the front porch. So then we'll go to the next one I have, which again is about 2 years later, and I've been actively logging my property and, of course, traveling my son back and forth. And it was Friday that I picked him up, and we'd always barbecue, and it's summer, and I live in an area where there's a lot of bears, and there's some cougars and bobcats and Sasquatch. I mean, many a times I've heard them screaming in the back or getting in fights amongst themselves where it'll sound like very much a female and yelling at something, and then they'll yell back and forth, and me and my son look at each other and go, whoa. And I go, yeah, that's Sasquatch. That's nothing else does that. So when we were where my property is, it's heavily wooded from the power lines all the way to the Skagit River. And so there was really, from the power lines to the river, there wasn't anywhere that, they could go through there and not be seen. Well, unfortunately, my acre and a half had big timber on it, 52 inches on the butt, nice second growth fir, hemlock, a lot of cedar. And so I logged it. And at the time, I was living in my fifth wheel, which was a toy hauler. And like a regular Friday night, we had dinner and we went to bed about 10:30, 11. And about 2:33, me and my son were woken, which at first I thought that my trailer got hit by a car that had come off the highway. That it actually hit my trailer because it threw me kind of like I was slammed. My feet were, I lay on my back. So my feet went up against the wall and it stood me up out of a dead sleep, like something hit the trailer that hard. And my son, he was slammed into the wall. And we both were kind of dazed, and we kind of went, I literally felt like the trailer's wheels left the ground on that side. And so I thought a car hit, I sound asleep. Maybe I didn't hear the crash. And I went to open up that door. And my son goes, Dad, don't open that door. And I go, why, son? He goes, no, that's a squatch. He says, no, it's a squatch, Dad. I know it is. He goes, I can feel him. And I go, what do you mean, Keegan? He goes, no, don't go outside. It's not a car. Seriously, Dad, it's a, kind of a swear word. And I kind of jumped him about it, but it's a squatch. He said, Dad, I hit that wall so hard. And so where his bed is I gave him the larger bed that raises up and down, that you raise up, that put your four-wheelers in, and you travel with it up. Well, when it's down, it sits about right in the middle of that wall. Now, when that Sasquatch hit that, like probably a football player put a shoulder into it, it actually broke both walls. And I still have pictures of my phone today where you look at my fifth wheel, and it's like something bulged it out back there where it literally sticks out like 6 inches farther and 6 inches in where it hit. And unfortunately, the ground's so rocky up there, no footprints at all. And so that was them kind of letting me know, I believe, that they were not real happy about their superhighway there being logged. And it wasn't soon after that I happened to be sitting in my toy hauler and was, I think, having a snack or a cup of coffee, and it was dark out, just about dark, dusk, the same year. but it was more in the fall. And older Sasquatch that was probably around 7.5 feet, but very gray, very much a gray, almost reminded me of like an old gray poodle color, like when the black starts to turn gray, salt and pepper. And it probably 4 steps, made it through 1.5 acres. But I can remember as I watched him, it was 1, 2, 3, and he looked over at my trailer and he had a look on his face like he was so sad, like he was visibly sad. He looked like, oh, what's he doing here? Kind of like, wow. And that kind of struck me, that they have intelligence and they do recognize, obviously, when their little super highway there that they ran back and forth from the power lines has been logged. And I'm sure between the one bulldog in the trailer and then the old one that was expecting to probably come out in the woods like it always has, and it's clear cut, and quite sad. And so then that's that one. And then we're going to go to about a year later. So this has probably been about 2 years ago. And unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but I like to go to the casino. And so the back way to the casino from Marblemount is 5:30. And that goes back through Darrington, and you can go back and end up in Arlington, and you can go to Angel Winds Casino. Well, I like to go really early in the morning, usually on a weeknight, to go gamble a little. Well, on my way back, I was coming back where there's a road about halfway down the 5:30 in between Rockport and Darrington where you can cross over to get to the South Skagit Highway and run the Skagit down. Well, as I was coming up, and it's a fairly sharp curve, they want you to slow down to, I think it is 40 miles an hour. I noticed this truck come out, and it was local natives, and they are allowed to net the Sauk-Suiattle. And so the truck comes out and doesn't even stop. And obviously they could see that I'm coming, but it just peels around the corner just sideways. And buoys are rolling out of the back, that they normally tie on the one end of their nets. And then as I get closer, this Volkswagen Jetta comes out and the windows are down and I can clearly see that they're native, and they come around the corner. And they're flooring it. And so I'm slowed down by that. The guy's already slowing down to 40. And then the big boy that was right behind him come out behind him. And it was a very large male Sasquatch. And it really startled me because of the size. He was enormous. 2 steps across that road, and it was no effort. And he had blood red eyes, and they were the size of cue balls. And he stared right at me, and he was mad. He was on them natives. And I think, maybe this is just my opinion, but I've heard that through other tribes that they will actually come in when they're netting. The locals kind of know that they're hungry, and so they know to pull their nets in and leave them some fish and then give them some space, and they will actually come in and gather fish. And I think these guys didn't have any fish to give, and I think it was not happy because it was right. It was right behind them, and you could tell it was determined to try to snatch one of them or try to hit the car or something. And then I startled it, and it was mad at me, and then it went off the road, and I kept going. Now that really, I'm scared the living crap out of me, and so I floor it. I'm going to try to catch these guys. Not to say that I'm an habitual speeder, but my little car was a Mercedes. So I'm doing 115 to finally catch up to these people. And it's pretty straight. And and I'm smelling antifreeze, and I'm seeing smoke finally come out. I was finally catching up to the Jetta, which was the last one. And as I got right up behind it finally, and before they turned on, the motor was blown. The antifreeze was pouring out, oil, smoke. And where they pulled off, I pulled in next to them, and they just pulled off, and then they were kind of halfway went in the driveway, and I looked at them, and I said, "Are you guys okay?" And they did not want to talk to me. They were white as ghosts. They said, "Get out of here. I don't know what you're talking about. We don't want to talk to you. Don't want to see you, blah, blah, blah." But they were you could tell that they were scared, that encounter that they had was probably scary, like real scary. And believe me, the size of that Sasquatch and the look he had on his face, I would have been scared too, because it meant business. It was not a happy camper. And so that's a few of them that I've had. And if you want me to keep going, I have a couple more, and that would probably be about it.
I got a few questions. That last one, I mean, that's just you said that's just 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Oh, my goodness, and you literally see a huge, angry male Sasquatch chasing after these vehicles down the road. Holy mackerel!
Yeah, and they were netting at that time, which they usually do. And I was floored by that. And then the funny thing is I was going 2 days later. I was going the other direction through that S curve, and I don't know if it was, maybe it's just me, but a bird that normally would not be out at night was thrown at it just came out of nowhere and just smacked my window, right smack in the middle of the driver's window, like something was throwing a baseball at me, but it was a bird. And I was like, whoa. And I went, there's no birds out here, because again, I was on my way to the casino and I had a good night the day that I saw the big male Sasquatch, and I actually think it recognized my car, and I think it chucked a bird at me. I really do, because it hit my windshield so hard. It wasn't from me speeding. It was like it had some velocity behind it, and there was no way that little brown bird that you usually see jumping around the bushes, I don't see him fly that fast. So that's just my feelings of it. But yeah, and I kind of went, wow, that's kind of weird. So I started taking the long way after that for a while.
The Sasquatch that you saw, running after these vehicles, and you'd mentioned that it had blood red eyes. Do you remember any other details of the face of it?
It was a not so much of a conical head, but it was just massive. This thing had to be, I would say 1,200 pounds. It was huge. All I know is it literally looked like it was walking, but it only took 3 steps to make it across the road. And I was like, and when it turned around and it looked at me with hatred, anger. You could just see it was pissed. It didn't show any teeth or anything, but those eyes, I remember those eyes, and I could remember that look on its face of just disgust. Like, this guy just spoiled my, I'm not eating here today because of these 3 vehicles here, whatever took place. You could just tell he was not happy. And I remember how big he was, because he kind of turned sideways. My God, his chest was, the width of his chest was wider than my car. He was huge. And the legs, they were like as big as telephone poles. This thing was absolutely massive. Very long hair, kind of a blackish with a red kind of in it. And yeah, it just, it kind of floored me. And I'm of Native American descent. I'm Ojibwe on my mother's side. Didn't find out till after she passed away because of the fishing and the bolt decision here in Washington State, and where the natives were allowed to net. Didn't sit well with the locals, so the family members were told not to tell anybody that they were native, just because people would get beat up and stuff would happen. So I didn't really even know that's how low the secret it was kept in. And I'd heard that tribes have interactions when they're netting with Sasquatch. And I know some over on the west side, the Quinault and them, and they don't let anybody around when they're netting. They don't let any locals, they don't let any white people, because they'll come in and start shaking trees and raising a little hell, and to bring in a net full of fish. So that's just one of my, my thoughts. I'm sure that one was quite mad, because yeah, I wouldn't want to run into that one. And there's also a rumor that says on the 530 that the east side of the highway is the devil squatch's side. They say that if you're picking mushrooms, you don't want to pick on the east side of that road. You want to pick on the west side. If you get in on the east side, something will run you out of there, and it's not very friendly. And so I've always kept heed to that because I pick mushrooms in that area too. And then I'll go to one more encounter, and then I'll save that couple more for our next one, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
Just this year, of course, it's chanterelle season, and I love chanterelles. So we're picking right off the 530, just past the Sasquatch tribe, which is, I won't give the general area. Good mushroom picking all over in there. And so we're picking mushrooms. It's hot out, it's middle of summer. It's, and we can hear the birds and the squirrels are kind of chirping at us because they're mad because, we're picking mushrooms and they like to run you off or think they do. And we're back in there quite a ways, probably 2 football fields in, kind of dense. The vine maples are kind of being a pain. And me and my girlfriend at the time just kind of noticed it got silent. And she goes, it just got quiet. And I said, well, you're right. I kind of, have that feeling like the hair raises up on your neck. And you kind of feel uneasy. Well, I felt uneasy, but I didn't feel fear. I felt like it's time to go. It's like that feeling where it's time to exit the woods. Nothing needs to tell you. It's just, So we worked our way back out and picking mushrooms all the way out. I had her sit in the car and I said, hey, I'm going to walk down this little spur road here because I found some really nice ones along behind these really big fir trees. And these fir trees are, 52, 53 inches on the butt. So they're pretty good second growth. They're not old growth, but big second growth. And so I'm walking back towards, and of course, we're on the east side, or not east side, we're on the west side. So, we're not going to run into devil squatch, as they call him. And I just happened to be walking, and just before I get to this real big fir, excuse me, I got a cough, I happened to see something glisten in the sunlight. And it's probably 35 feet away from me, and an old growth stump. It has some ferns growing out of it. You could see where they had their springboards in when they cut it back in the, God knows, 1860s or whatever. It's a very large stump. And there's a Sasquatch that's sitting there with his arms, and his face is right on his hands. And he's as tall as the stump is. And that stump's, when I went back and measured it, was just a little under 10 foot. And so he was sitting there. So he was darn near, probably pretty close to 11 and a half feet is what I figured how big he was, unless he was standing on something. His head was huge, very, not ape looking, not orangutan, but very black, leathery skin, very dark black eyes. But that's what made me see him, because I would not have seen him if it wasn't his eyes glistened in the sun. I just happened to step right where the sun reflected off his eyes, and I went, what is that? And then I went, as I stare a little bit longer, and I'm like, what? And then when you get that moment, my cell phone's in my back pocket. You think I would have pulled that out and took a picture? No. I sat there and went, holy cow, that thing is huge. It wasn't menacing. It never blinked an eyeball, never moved a muscle. And I was like, holy cow, that one's big. And I go, it didn't seem aggressive, but it was watching me. And so I sat and stared at it, and I went, wow, this is really crazy. I'm like within 35 feet of a very large Sasquatch. I mean, this is real. This is, you're almost like face to face to this thing. And it's like nonchalantly just sitting there with his arms on top of that stump and his head kind of pushed in through the ferns. And I'm like, Jesus, what do I didn't know really what to do, because I didn't feel threatened. But, I kind of had that feeling it was time to leave the woods. So I went ahead and stepped past that fir tree and kind of peeked my head around to see if he was still there. And he was gone. And what really blew me away is he didn't make one sound. There wasn't a tree break. There wasn't a crunch. Nothing. it was gone and never made a sound. And that floored me. And I literally went and got in the car and started to drive away. And then I told my girlfriend about it. And she goes, I felt like there was something that was kind of watching us out there for a while. I said, so did I, but I thought maybe it was a cougar or something. And no, it was just a very large Sasquatch, whether it be female or male, I don't know. But that was one that kind of the oh wow moment. I'm not in the top of the food chain here, or wasn't aggressive, but definitely kind of puts you back when you see something that large that actually lives in the Pacific Northwest. And coming from a logging family that's logged since the 1940s, all my cousins and uncles, you can ask them about Sasquatch and they are use the word, they'll say, nope, never seen one, never seen a footprint, nothing. And tell you the truth, all the logging jobs that I was on all those years, we would never see a footprint or anything. So that's kind of, that's where I'm going to tie it up right there. That's kind of the meat of the fact. And then I have a few more that's happened here. Now that one was just this last summer, everybody knows. And like I said, the area is the Cascades, Highway 20 and 530. And so those are my up close and personal encounters up to this point. And then I got a couple more too to share with you on maybe another episode, if that works for you.
Absolutely. I mean, those are some wild stories, and thank you so much for sharing, Johnny. I do have to ask you while you're here in this one, you've had a few sightings over the years, and when someone is like, hey, Johnny, a Bigfoot or Sasquatch, what is it that we're looking at out there? What is it that you saw? How would you explain it? Is it more of some kind of ape, or maybe some kind of human?
The way it's kind of a very, I call them a North American ape. I mean, they're not an ape. They don't really have an ape. They don't really have a chimpanzee. They're leathery. Some have a conical head. Some are, have different things. And then from being Ojibwe, from upper Wisconsin, there's interactions there that you hear through folklore. And there's, I guess, several different species. I'm not a investigator, or I don't go out to try to find these. I'm usually out in the woods, either cutting firewood, hunting, logging, or just minding my own business, picking mushrooms or rock hounding, or doing a little gold panning or something. And that's why I live where I live, because I can four-wheel, I can be at Baker or Shannon Lake with my ski boat in 45 minutes, and I can enjoy the outdoors. I wasn't expecting to run into any of these or see any of those, and just the last 5 years has been mind-boggling, phenomenal. I mean, it's left me speechless. I've always been a believer, of course, the Gimlin film, and I always knew there was something out there because I could hear him scream. I've heard a lot of vocals throughout the years, and but until you see one, it's kind of really, it'll put you back, because they are very large, very smart, very intelligent. They have the facial features. And from the vocalizations I've heard, when I've heard a couple of them getting scolded by one, and that one that was chasing those two poor natives, or those natives that were netting there, I felt bad for them guys, because the look of fear in their faces was something I'll remember for a long time. You just don't, you don't see that kind of fear in people. I mean, where they're literally pasty, pale white, and they're not wanting nothing to do with you. They don't want to even remember what just happened,
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, I don't think I'd ever forget something like that if I was able to be in a situation like that. Either side of it, I mean, your side or their side, really, either side has got to be crazy to be part of. But Johnny, thank you so much for coming on the show the first time and sharing what you've experienced. And This is an area of Washington we don't actually hear a lot of, so it's pretty special to have you on. I think this is our first time maybe even hearing from Marblemount, but yeah, thank you so much. We'll be in touch for sure to have you on again to maybe share some more about what you've experienced over the years.
Yeah. And then I also have a roommate, unfortunately, that passed away here recently of cancer, and he'd had several encounters in that area and in areas of Montana where he worked at, and he shared those with me. If you don't mind me telling those stories next time.
Absolutely.
They're pretty wild too. So,
yeah.
But hey, I appreciate your time, Jeremiah. I mean, I really do. And by no means did I ever expect to have this happen to me, but you know, they are out there, and you know, this when you get that feeling that it's time to leave, it's time to leave. And you know, if you ever come across one, I don't know, I just always kind of just went, oh boy, that one that I got close to, I just kind of slowly moved to my car and left.
Right.
And didn't go. And then I didn't go mushroom picking the rest of the year there.
Yeah.
So and then contemplating on maybe not going this next year, you know. I've been kind of thinking, man, that's a good place, but I don't know if I want to go back.
Yeah, is it that good though? You know, you never know. But
yeah, right. Yeah. There's a lot of areas up there. Yeah. But anyway, I do appreciate your time, Jeremiah.
Yes, sir. And you have have a good rest of your birthday, Johnny.
Yes, I sure will. Thank you, sir.
All right.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Just want to take a few minutes to say thank you to you, all my listeners, for listening to the podcast. Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's a list: the Subtle Lake area of Oregon, Rainbow, Oregon, McKinsey Bridge area, Sweet Home, pretty much that entire area, the north part, if you get what I mean. I'll see you back next time, listeners. Sasquatch Summerfest this year, July 11th through the 12th. It's going to be fantastic. July 11th through 12th in Green Waters Park in Oak Ridge, Oregon. And listeners, if you're going to go, you can get a 2-day ticket for the cost of one if you use the code BFS, like Bigfoot Society, but BFS, and it'll get you some off your cost. Priscilla was nice enough to provide that for my listeners. So there you go. I look forward to seeing you there. So make sure you head over to www.sasquatchsummerfest.com and pick up your tickets today.